All right, so it looks like we've got a whole stack of videos all about that vegan teacher.
Yeah, you guys really seem ready to jump into this one.
And honestly, so am I. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, she's quite a case study, that vegan teacher.
Yeah, uniques for sure.
Definitely unique. She's attracted some pretty passionate supporters, but also a whole legion of critics, and it all comes down to her. Well, so let's just say unique style of getting the vegan message out there.
From what I've seen so far, confrontation doesn't really seem to faze her. If anything, she kind of seems to like it.
Maybe even thrives on it, you could say.
Before we get into all that, though, we should probably set the stage a little bit.
Good point.
For anyone who might not be totally familiar with this whole saga,
Absolutely. So I've got commentary videos from a bunch of different YouTubers, each with their own take on things. We've got August the Duck, who's known for, well, his kind of dry humor and deadpan reactions. And we've got Panchi, who likes to really dissect her arguments and call out anything he sees as hypocritical. And of course, we've got Dumpy, who often uses satire and dark humor to comment on internet culture in general, which of course includes figures like that vegan teacher.
just to be super clear, our goal here isn't to debate whether veganism is right or wrong or anything like that. We're more interested in why that vegan teacher causes such strong reactions.
Both positive and negative.
Exactly, both sides. We're going to be using all these commentators' videos as our lens to see just how effective or maybe ineffective her tactics really are.
It's all about trying to understand how communication works online and how different approaches can either really resonate with an audience or just totally turn them off.
Okay, so let's get into some of the recurring themes that pop up in all these videos. One thing that pretty much every commentator points out is that vegan teachers, well, her forceful communication style, shall we say.
Right. Her use of really strong, often accusatory language. A Cheeto even called her the oldest TikToker at one point, implying that her methods might be a little out of touch with how younger audiences tend to communicate.
It is interesting, though, because while passion is definitely seen as a good thing when it comes to activism, there's a fine line between being passionately persuasive and just being aggressively off-putting.
For sure.
Like when August the Duck reacted to her calling speciesism a disease and humans a disease on the planet, he just kind of sighed and said, hello, okay. Vegan teacher's lagging again. Like her intensity almost creates this distance where viewers are more focused on her turn than what she's actually saying.
That's where the psychology of communication really comes into play. When people feel attacked or belittled, they're just way less likely to be receptive to the message, even if they might actually agree with the underlying point.
Right. It's like that saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. But instead of honey, she's using like spicy sriracha or something.
Speaking of strong flavors, another tactic that gets a lot of attention is her use of guilt and shame.
Oh yeah, this is where things start to get a little uncomfortable. Curtis Price even brought up this quote where she said, if this had been somebody's penis covered in sauce, the child would have had the same reaction. Like, I don't even know where to go with that one.
It's definitely meant to be shocking, and it really begs the question, does this kind of language actually motivate people to change, or does it just make them feel judged and defensive?
Right, because shame is a powerful emotion. It can make you feel small and inadequate, which doesn't really make you want to open your mind or see another perspective.
Have you ever been shamed into doing something? Like, did it actually make you want to do it?
No, not really.
Me neither.
There's a huge difference between appealing to someone's conscience and just making them feel bad about themselves. And that vegan teacher seems to blur those lines pretty often, at least according to the commentator.
Yeah, at least in their view.
So we've got the aggressive language, the guilt trips, but there's another part of our approach that they seem to find problematic. Oversimplification.
Oh, yeah.
August the Duck had this great reaction to that vegan teacher's statement that animals would fade out of existence if everyone went vegan.
Yeah.
He was basically like, hold on, does she actually want to save the animals or did she just want to get rid of them?
It's such a good point. It highlights how it makes them seem like maybe they don't fully grasp the complexities themselves, and that can lead people to just dismiss their message entirely.
All right, so aggressive language, guilt trips, oversimplification to anything else.
Oh, for sure. One thing that several commentators pick up on, like Calmecris, is her apparent obsession with certain YouTubers and celebrities. It's almost like she's got this personal mission to convert these specific people, even if their content has absolutely nothing to do with veganism.
Yeah, she's gone after everyone from Tommy Innit to Gordon Ramsay to Mr. Beast, even the Queen of England, both before and after her death. It's like, I'm a teacher, I'm allowed to talk to him.
It's a really good example of what people call parasocial relationships, where people develop this sense of connection with online personalities, even if it's totally one-sided. And it raises questions about whether it's okay to use someone else's platform to push your own agenda.
Like she's trying to hijack their audience, which can feel a little intrusive.
Yeah.
Dumpy even suggested that this whole fixation on big YouTubers is just a way to get views and attention, like it's all just rage bait.
Yeah. Well, controversy definitely generates clicks.
For sure.
And clicks are basically currency in the online world,
True that.
especially in the world of online content creation.
So we've covered a lot of ground already, but we can't ignore the elephant in the room. Or should I say the singing vegan in the room? That
Yeah.
vegan teachers' love of music and, well, let's just call it creative expression.
Right, yeah.
I think it's time to let the music speak for itself. How about we play a little snippet of one of her dot songs?
I'm game. Let's hear it.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
So, thoughts?
Well, it's certainly unique.
I think unique is a good way to put it. The commentators definitely have a lot to say about her musical stylings. Some find it cringeworthy, others strangely compelling, but everyone seems to agree that it's something.
Yeah, humor is a tricky thing when it comes to persuasion.
Oh, totally.
When it works, it can be incredibly effective, you know? It disarms people, makes complex topics seem more approachable.
Yeah.
But when it misses the mark, it can come across as tone-deaf, insensitive, just plain awkward. And from what I've seen, it seems like a lot of her musical attempts fall more into the awkward category.
It does make you wonder about the thought process behind those songs.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, is she trying to be funny, serious, provocative, or a little bit of all three? And how does the use of music affect how people receive her message? Does it make her seem more relatable, or does it just reinforce the idea that she's out of touch?
Those are great questions. And the answer, like most things in life, is probably complicated. But one thing is for sure. She's definitely not afraid to take risks, even if they sometimes blow up in her face.
Yeah, playing it safe isn't really her style. But there's one more thing we need to address, and it's probably the most controversial of all. Her use of emotionally charged events and comparisons, specifically the Holocaust.
Right. This is where things get really sensitive. We definitely need to approach this with a certain level of respect and gravity.
Agreed. Okay, let's take a deep breath and dive into this next chapter of the That Vegan Teacher saga. This is going to be interesting.
You know, despite all the criticism that she gets, there are actually times where the commentators, even if they don't mean to, actually seem to agree with her.
Really? I'm
Yeah.
surprised. Where do they agree with her?
Well, think about how she always talks about the hypocrisy of loving pets while eating other animals.
Mm.
It's a common argument in vegan circles, and at least one of the commentators seems to agree.
Okay, who are we talking about here?
August the Duck. While he was reacting to one of her videos about this, he actually admitted, he said, "There is a documented cognitive dissonance involving humans and how we eat animals and how we treat them. It's just something that you kind of have to accept." He even said, "Steak is probably my favorite food, yet I don't think I could bring myself to kill a cow."
Wow, that's pretty honest. So even someone who clearly likes to eat meat can see the ethical inconsistency there.
Exactly. And it highlights a point that she often makes, even if she doesn't always make it in the most pleasant way. Right. She argues that ethical veganism is about trying to be consistent in how we treat all living creatures, whether they're cute and cuddly or end up on our plates.
But isn't that where the whole practicable argument comes in?
Right.
Remember that clip where Panchi reacts to her saying veganism is about not hurting animals unless it is absolutely necessary?
Yeah.
He basically called her out, said she was lying, and that you're either vegan or you're not.
Yeah, he said there's no in between.
Right.
And that's where the nuances of veganism get kind of complicated. I mean, she does admit that there are times when eating animal products might be the only option for survival.
Like in really extreme environments, yeah.
Right. Or in cultures where there aren't many plant-based options.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think Panchi's reaction shows a more hardcore vegan perspective.
Mm-hmm.
One that says that in a modern society with all the plant-based options we have now, there's pretty much never a real need to harm animals for food.
Absolutely. And that's a valid perspective within the movement. It shows how there are all these different beliefs and practices, even in a movement that seems to have a very clear message.
Okay, so we're seeing some points of agreement, but also a lot of disagreement. What about the commentators' overall take on that vegan teacher's impact? Does they think she's actually getting people to go vegan with these methods?
Well, Inabber, who often has really insightful commentary on online trends and personalities, he made a good point. He said, if people want to eat chicken nuggets, let them do it. But if they don't, who cares? My issue is with this TikTok, these 14-year-olds aren't going to be going vegan anytime soon because of these TikToks. If anything, they're going to be put off veganism.
Yeah, if you're constantly hearing aggressive and guilt-trippy messaging, it's more likely to make you run the other way.
Exactly. It's like a Cheeto said to her, kind of sarcastically in one of his videos. He's like, if you've ever disagreed with that vegan teacher, you are insane. That's the kind of dismissive, accusatory language that just turns people off completely.
So a lot of these commentators feel like she's actually doing more harm than good.
Yeah, alienating potential converts and reinforcing those negative stereotypes about vegans being preachy and judgmental.
Which even some vegans are worried about.
Absolutely.
Like, they're concerned that she's giving the whole movement a bad name.
It's like that one friend everyone has who's super passionate about something, but they're so intense about it that it just makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
And then you end up avoiding talking to them because you know it's just going to turn into another lecture.
That's a great analogy. It really shows how important it is to find that balance between passion and persuasion. You can care deeply about something without alienating everyone around you.
For sure.
Some commentators even see her as a cautionary tale.
Oh, yeah.
Like, Cheeto joked about contacting her for his PhD in psychology, calling her videos a study in complete insanity. And Dumpy said she's a rage bait artist who just loves to provoke reactions.
Yeah.
He even said that her husband retired her, and now she just lives off of that and is bored in her house knitting clothes.
Ouch.
Harsh, I know. But whether it's true or not, it shows how some people see her as being more about the attention than about actually helping animals. She's become a caricature of herself.
That can happen to anyone trying to build a platform or promote a cause online.
Oh, definitely.
There's that line between being authentic and being performative.
Right.
And it's easy to lose sight of your original goals when you're so caught up in the clicks and comments.
So are we basically saying that she's all shock value and no substance? Is that the takeaway here?
I don't think so. Even in the critiques, you can see glimpses of genuine concern for animal welfare from these commentators. Remember how Inabber, even though he had problems with her methods, acknowledged that most vegans are lovely, they just don't want to eat meat and dairy.
Right.
He even said he was worried that she might actually be hurting the vegan movement.
So it's not that the commentators are against veganism, they just disagree with how she's going about it.
Exactly. It's about the method, not the message itself.
I'm actually curious now. Do any of the commentators actually offer suggestions for how she could do things differently? Like real constructive criticism, not just making fun of her?
Yeah, actually, there are a few times when they give some genuinely good advice. For example, Oompaville, after being taught by her in this funny role-playing bit, concluded by saying there's ways to go about spreading your message positively without trying to guilt people into doing mass.
Okay, so less guilt, more positivity. What else?
Well, after watching her criticize Gordon Ramsay's cooking, Kai Doi just pointed out, there's this thing called dot preferences.
Haha, true. Sometimes it's easy to forget that not everyone wants to eat the same things or live by the same rules.
Right, respect for individual choices is important.
Absolutely.
Maybe focusing on the good parts of veganism, like the health benefits, the environmental impact, how good plant-based food can taste. That might be a better strategy than just dwelling on the negative stuff all the time.
It's like that saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. You can try to convince someone all you want, but in the end, it's their choice.
Absolutely. Trying to force someone to change almost always backfires.
Yeah.
It usually just makes them dig in their heels even more.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, how often do we try to convert people without really trying to understand their point of view?
That's such a good point. This whole deep dive has really shown how important it is to be aware of how we communicate, especially online.
Yeah.
Things can get out of control so fast, and it's easy to lose all the nuance.
So easy to fall into that trap of thinking we've got all the answers and that everyone else just needs to see things our way.
Right.
But everyone comes to the table with their own experiences and values.
Absolutely.
Instead of shutting down people who disagree with us, maybe we should try to listen to them.
Yeah.
See where they're coming from, even if we don't agree in the end.
That's a great point.
Okay, so we've talked about her aggressive language, the guilt trips, the oversimplification, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
We even saw some points of agreement and some good advice from the commentators. But there's one last thing we need to look at, and it's probably the most controversial. Her use of emotionally charged events, especially the Holocaust. We need to delve into that next because it really gets to the heart of ethical advocacy and what happens when you cross the line. All right, so we've talked about her passionate approach to veganism, but now we got to address the elephant in the room. Her use of, well, emotionally charged events, especially the Holocaust, has caused a lot of controversy.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most sensitive parts of this whole conversation. August the Duck was pretty shaken when he reacted to her saying things like, because Hitler at least stopped at 6 million or more.
Yeah.
Comparing factory farming to the Holocaust, I mean, it's just deeply disturbing to a lot of people, and for good reason.
It's tough to even know where to begin with that. I get what she's trying to say, that the suffering of animals in factory farms is awful, but comparing it to the Holocaust is so disrespectful.
Not to mention historically inaccurate.
Totally.
That's a perfect example of how good intentions can just go completely wrong.
Yeah.
The Holocaust is such a sensitive topic. To equate it with animal agriculture, no matter how bad the practices are, it just trivializes the human suffering involved.
And Einaver had a really interesting point about this. He said, while she does just say this for attention and to be provocative, I do think that she believes these things, and I do think that's incredibly worrying.
That's kind of a scary thought, isn't it?
It is.
It's a level of conviction that's both admirable and dangerous at the same time.
Right.
When you really believe that your cause is that important, you might be tempted to do whatever it takes to get people to listen. Even if it means using sensitive events or making comparisons that are really offensive.
And it's not just the Holocaust. Remember when Panchi reacted to her song about animals not being able to breathe? He called her out for trying to bait people who supported BLM.
Right. By making it about George Floyd's death.
It's another example of how emotionally charged language can backfire, especially when it seems like it's being used for something that, while important, isn't on the same level as historical and social injustice.
Right.
While factory farming is a serious issue, using the language of the Black Lives Matter movement can feel exploitative.
It's like she's trying to use the emotional weight of these events without really understanding or respecting them.
Yeah.
And that can be really off-putting to people who have been directly affected by them.
It's almost like she's ranking different types of suffering, which is never a good idea.
Right.
All forms of oppression are important, but we need to be aware of the context of each issue.
So is there a right way to use emotionally charged events in activism? Or are some things just completely off limits?
That's a tough one. I think it comes down to empathy, respect, and understanding. Before you bring up sensitive events or make comparisons, you have to think about how it might affect the people who've been directly impacted. Right, because even if you have good intentions, the way your message comes across can have unintended consequences.
Exactly. Words and images are powerful, especially when you're talking about sensitive topics.
Sometimes the best way to get your point across is to focus on the positive, highlight solutions, instead of just dwelling on the negative.
Right. Like you said before, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Exactly.
You can give someone all the information in the world, but it's up to them to decide what they believe and what choices they make.
Well, this has been quite a deep dive.
Yeah, it has.
That vegan teacher is definitely a fascinating case study. She's shown us both the power and the pitfalls of online communication.
And given us a lot to think about.
She's a good reminder that passion isn't enough. We also need to be thoughtful, strategic, and most importantly, respectful when we're fighting for what we believe in.
Sure.
So what about you, dear listener? Have you ever run into someone like that vegan teacher online? Someone who's really passionate, but maybe a little too much? How do you deal with those situations?
Remember, you don't always have to try to change someone's mind.
Right.
Sometimes just listening and trying to understand their perspective is more valuable than winning an argument.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's best to just walk away.
And on that note, we're going to leave you with this final thought. In a world that's becoming more and more divided, how can we stand up for what we believe in while still being respectful and understanding? That's something to think about, maybe with some vegan chili or a nice steak, depending on what you're into. Until next time, happy deep diving.